want to welcome you back to the podcast, How to Play the Game of College. This season, again, we're talking to real folks, and the theme again is keeping it real about college. So when I say, y'all, I am glad to have this guest on today. She's like family, but I'm gonna pause right there because you see how excited I got. And I want to welcome you to the podcast, Dr. Jordan. How you doing today?
I am well. How are you?
Got you. And I love is that my book in the background?
The
Yes. I,
same as yours.
I love the prop, how you got the book up there. But I'm gonna pause for a second. If you can, just give us a brief overview of who you are, what you do, and we'll get started with the interview.
Okay, so my name is Dr. Amada Jordan.
Sure.
I am the Student Experience Director at Chattanooga State Community College in Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Okay.
And so, in that job, I kind of oversee student engagement, student belonging, student involvement. And that looks like overseeing leadership, student leadership organizations, student clubs, and just making sure the students are acclimated, making sure that they are retained is the big goal. So just kind
Okay.
of meeting students where they are and just enhancing their college experience.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you for that, and shout out to Chat State Community College. I had the pleasure of actually doing a workshop for your students earlier this year, and so that was opportunity or experience I definitely won't forget. Had a great time, so definitely shout out to Chat State.
You were well received, so thank
Thank
you.
you, thank you. So, Dr. Jordan, outside of what you do, right, your title, right, who is Amanda Jordan?
Amanda is I'm a wife and I'm a mom. I'm a Christian.
Okay,
And those three things take up all of my time. I always say that this is my first shift and my second shift starts when I get home. My husband is Jamichael. We've been married for almost 9 years. And then we have three little boys. Micah is 6, Nason is 4, and Asa is 1. So they keep us very occupied with youth sports and all of those
yeah,
things.
yeah.
And then, of course, we're very active in our church. My husband is a pastor at a local church here. He's a youth pastor. And so we are in all types of different clubs and committees. And I'm actually on the scholarship committee at church. So
Oh, okay.
outside of my job in education, I do education and ministry. There really is a very important part of who I am. My grandmother was an educator. My mom is not an educator, but she's a huge advocate of it. And then I went into education myself. So
Okay. Okay. It's, I always say when you have a gift, you could just never escape it.
I
So no
agree.
matter where you are in your sorority, the church, it's like it's always just gonna pull on you to do that type of work. So
When you mentioned that, let me go back. And I'm also a member of Delta Sigma Theta
okay.
Sorority Incorporated. So we're going to slide that in there too.
Yeah, yeah. We're so glad to hear, and again, so glad to have you on the interview today. And so, again, this theme, we have had over 20 interviews on the podcast, and I really want to focus in on some real questions with this particular season. And so, I'm gonna have you to jive back to memory lane, right? And I know you have 3 degrees now, and so just kind of thinking back on your history, or you can even talk about students that you deal with, right, at Chat State. What do you feel that has been your obstacle or something you had to overcome when it came to post-secondary? Or like I said, you can talk about a particular student.
So first and foremost, I would say it was probably a financial issue, and I just say that from the lens of my school was not entirely paid for, but I also don't come from money in a
Right.
sense, so what what I had to work for. So my friends would joke and say, if it's one thing Amanda is gonna do, she's gonna work. And it's just because that's what I had to do. I couldn't call home and say, hey, mom, hey, dad, could you send me this? I had other siblings at home. I have a
Right.
disabled mom, and I had a dad that was working to provide for them. So I just learned from jump that I had to get out and get it myself. So,
Yeah.
of course, college is important. Going to class is important. Being involved is important. But if you don't have the money to live, to sustain yourself, you're
Mhm.
going to go, you're going to leave, you're going to withdraw. And so
Right.
for me, it was just a balance of time management, learning to work. There were literally times when I was giving tours, I was getting paid to be an orientation guide. I was working
Mm.
at a daycare center down the street. I was working at the mall. So I was hustling while I
Right.
was in school. And so that pulls on my heartstrings when I see students in those positions. And those are the type of students that I like to get to work for me, because I
Right.
will work with you. And
Yeah.
so that's
Yeah.
something I'll put up there, is just work study, because you have the opportunity to work and to make income. But a lot of times the work study jobs are laid back, so you can still work
Mhm,
on your
mhm.
schoolwork and kind of, stay ahead of your academic game. So I
Right.
think that was probably my journey. And I want to do another plug also.
Yeah.
Something that I did not experience in undergrad, because this podcast will reach a lot of people. It won't just reach your traditional undergrad students.
Hmm. Hmm.
But the biggest challenge in life that I faced as a student was when I got my doctoral degree, and that was being a student parent.
Wow.
Again, that is something that I did not have to do in my undergraduate years, or when I got my master's. Kids were not on my mind. But
Right.
going back to school with two kids at the time, I ended up getting pregnant while in my doctoral program and having a third a few
Yeah.
months before I completed. But that is a different ball
Yeah. Yeah.
game. And so
Right.
I really do feel like God put me in that situation to be able to help my students now.
True. Yeah.
So I just really encourage student parents to find your tribe, find your
Hmm.
support
Hmm.
system, work with other moms. Hey
Right.
girl, I'm gonna watch the kids this week so you can work on your paper. You watch them next week so I can get ready for my test. So it's just really using your resources and just keeping the end in mind, and remember who's watching you, because your children are. They can't be what they can't see. So
So
when they
true.
say you complete that degree, it'll give them the fire to do the same one day.
So true. And I'm glad how you mentioned, a lot of times we think about the traditional student that's coming from high school, no job, right? They're going right into college. So again, you kind of hinted on why I wanted to do this season, right? So folks who might have kids in undergrad, right?
Right.
A lot of times we think, or students might think, I got all this going on. I can't possibly have a job, kids, and do school. But I like how you've been saying, like, even since the University of Memphis, your undergraduate degree, up into your terminal degree at Tribeca, that, hey, I've had to work. I didn't come from money. I had to, sacrifice, and I kept
Right.
sacrificing, right? And so I think that's important to call those particular things out. Again, I know you, Dr. Jordan. And so I want to pull out something. And of course, in the book, I talk about how you mentioned financing, your college degree, right? So I give tips in the book on how you can do that. And work study, as you mentioned, was one of those ways. But the power of relationships, right? And so I remember meeting you when I first started at the University of Memphis, I think back in 06, 07, as you just mentioned, orientation guide, and the list goes on and on. What do you feel that having relationships, right, and forming relationships while you're in undergrad, what has it personally done for you?
Man, that is invaluable.
Mhm.
Again, I tell my students that all the time. You cannot just go and sit in an
Yeah.
instructor's class and not say a thing or not introduce yourself.
Mhm.
Um, it's one at the end of the semester. If you're struggling, if you have an 88 and you need that 90, if your instructor knows your name, they know you've been coming to class, they're more likely to work with you. I'm not saying
Mhm.
they're going to give you some free grades,
Right.
but I'm saying they're more likely to work with you, maybe slide you some extra credit. And the same thing goes outside of the classroom as well. You're going to need recommendations for if you're, again, I'm at a community college, so I always tell students from the lens of transferring to a university, you're going to need letters of recommendation for that.
Right.
You'll need letters of recommendations for jobs, for scholarships, for community organizations, for Greek organizations.
Mhm.
And again, I can't write about you and give you an adequate letter if I don't know who you are, if I
So
don't know who
true.
you are as a person, your character.
Right.
It's one thing to list the things that you're in, but I need to be able to speak to you. This
Mhm.
person is reliable. This person is dependable. This person is a hard worker. They're positive, or whatever the characteristic may be. Those relationships, like I said, they're just invaluable.
Yeah.
From you to throwing out names, I don't know if I should, to Lofton,
Yeah. Yeah.
to whoever, to Kate. I mean, just meeting people and them
Mhm.
investing in me as a 18-year-old, 19-year-old, 20-year-old.
Mhm.
That for me personally, that kind of, put me on the path of going into higher education.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
just never know where those relationships can take you, because you all gave me the opportunity to get jobs. I got a graduate assistantship. I ended up taking over STEM,
Yeah.
and I've been out of college almost 20 years. And I'll call you for a minute for a recommendation. So, but it
I
really
think I,
is.
I think I still owe you a recommendation, right?
Yeah, I'm sure you do. LinkedIn,
I just
huh?
thought about it. Yeah.
So, but seriously though, those
Yeah.
relationships, you can't make it without them. And then on
Yeah.
a flip side, you want those relationships for people to keep it real with you.
So
Like,
true.
hey,
Yeah.
you're a great person, but you need to you've been a little late. You need to
Right.
step your
Right.
game up, or you need to do this, or you need to do that. So it's not always somebody telling you what you want to hear,
Hmm.
but they're
Hmm.
giving you that constructive criticism, because whether you're going in the field that they're going in, or just if you're moving into employment or adulthood, anything,
Right.
you just want those people who've walked that path before you to help you on your journey.
So true, so true. And I'm so glad you said that. It takes a village. And I'm just curious, a lot of times I know my time in higher ed, almost 2 decades now, we have a lot of students that say, I'm shy, or how do I start relationships? Like, some students don't know where to start. Do you have any advice for that student who might be an introvert, who might just come to class and they shoot out as soon as the time for them to leave, right? And they wonder like, I can't get involved. I don't know anybody. What type of advice would you give to that student?
See, that's hard for me because I will talk to a wall.
Right.
So it's just not something that I
Yeah,
struggle
yeah,
with. But I would just say, I mean, find a commonality. Hey, girl, your shoes are cute. Where you get those from? And then y'all can, start talking from there. Or find a study buddy in class. That way, it starts off with the commonality of your academic. You're talking about your
right,
classes or your career, the test, and then from there, it just naturally evolves into something else. But
right.
at the end of the day, I'm going to be honest. It's all about, you have to bet on yourself. So you just
So
have to
true.
grow out of grow out of your comfort zone. Or what
Mhm,
you'll do is you'll
mhm.
start seeing people around you getting opportunities because they opened up and
Right.
talked and went forward. So sometimes we just have to stretch ourselves, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but that's just a
Hmm.
skill that you have to work on, and
So
that's the
true.
point of college, is to work on the skills. We're not expecting you as a 20-year-old or a sophomore in college to have it figured out, but we know
Right.
that you're learning. And so that's the time to work on those skills, because when you graduate and hit the real world, they expect you to have it.
So true. So true. And I like, again, that's a real piece of advice, right? You can't go into an interview and say, hey, I'm shy. You know, don't
You
ask
cannot.
me but a few questions. I don't want to interview. I'm gonna look down
Mhm.
because again, I used to tell students, we're in the real world. And that's what college, like you just said, is preparing you for. And so, like you said, there's many places you can start with something small, with, hey, your shoes look great. I think office hours, right? It kind of gives you more of that one-on-one, so you don't feel like you're in this big space with a lot of students to kind of start some of those conversations. And like you said, the main thing to do is get involved. So like when you're involved, you just had a leadership retreat that I came to
Right.
where I had students presenting and they spoke and different things like that. So you get a chance to practice. So when you get into that job interview, guess what? You're ready to go. You're
And I
ready.
want to add one more
Yeah.
thing to that.
Yeah.
Most college campuses will have a career development office, and
Mm-hmm.
so that's always a good step to stop for some formalized
Yeah.
training. So they can
Yeah.
give you some formalized tips on what to do, what hand to shake with, how to look somebody in the eye, not to say not to look in the sky.
Right.
Those
Mhm.
small tidbits that make a big difference. So I would encourage a student to start there too.
So true, so true. So glad you mentioned that. In the world, right, we have so many different options when it comes to post-secondary now, right? So you do have where you work a community college, you have a 4 year, you have certifications, you have, HBCUs. There's so many different options. What would you say? And again, this podcast goes out to students, it goes out to parents. But a lot of times the question I get, and it's chapter 1 in the book, right? It talks about college fit. Why a community college? If you're looking at a list of all these colleges, why should a student consider a community college?
Oh, well, first and foremost, if I'm keeping it real, it's
Yeah.
finances. Especially in the state of Tennessee. I am so proud of my state because we lead the effort in regard to community college. We were the
Yeah.
first Tennessee, we were the first state in the United States to offer free community
Yeah.
college
Yeah.
to any student who qualifies.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I mean, I just think that's phenomenal. So you have, when I was in school, we didn't have that opportunity. A community college was never even introduced to me. So
Right.
the fact that, first of all, I think there's a stigma. There's nothing wrong with going to a community college. These are the same instructors. They can teach anywhere they want, but they're choosing to teach here. The classes, a lot of times, are just as rigorous.
Hmm.
They're just as fulfilling. We have just as many options. This is
Right.
a credible degree that you can get. You can then leave here and transfer to a 4 year institution if you choose to. But a lot of careers, specifically when we come to things like nursing and certain
Mhm.
engineering fields, an associate's will get you paid in the shade, so you
So
don't
true.
need anything
Yes.
else.
Yes.
However, like I said, I do, encourage education, so keep going as far as you can go.
Mhm.
But as far as you can go, excuse me, but a community college is a great start.
Yeah.
And then sometimes we just have to know our children. Again, I have three boys, and one of them, they're little, but if they went to college today, one
Right.
of them is going to go to a 4 year university probably across the United States, and he's going to be fine.
Right.
But
Yeah.
the other one, his personality is not as outgoing as his brothers. He's a little bit more reserved. So who knows? He may be my child that needs to stay close. He may
Yeah.
be the one that wants to look into a community college.
Mhm. Mhm.
So it's just knowing who your child is. Sometimes they're not ready to go off just yet. Sometimes they want to stay closer. And I say that not to say that you can't leave and go to
Right.
a community college, but most people that go to a community college, they literally say it's because they want to stay close to home. So
Yeah.
this is a
Yeah.
viable option for that population as well.
Gotcha.
But a community college, and I also feel like I'm very proud of my institution. So I don't know if this is all community colleges,
Yeah.
but we are very resourceful. So
Mhm.
we just offer that extra layer of support the students may need.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I encourage you. I'm not saying you have to go to a community
Yeah.
college because
Yeah.
again, I did not, but don't
Right.
knock it till you try it. So
So
I would
true.
tell all parents my advice, what I would tell another parent, and what I would do with my own children. You can apply for every school that you want to. You can apply
Right.
to the University of Honolulu,
Right.
but you are going to apply to the local community college as well, because you never know what can happen. You never know how money looks. And so
Right.
the community college may be a better fit.
So true, so true. And you said so much. Look, I'm ready to re-enroll. And again, I come from the community college background. I was at Middle Tennessee State, but I went for a few summers. And of course, I worked at one. So everything that you mentioned, and I love for folks who work in post-secondary to talk about the options, because sometimes students don't know the options, right? And so it really starts with setting yourself up for success. You have to have the right college fit.
And
It's,
even for parents that may see
yeah,
this, sometimes parents want to go back to school and they may
yeah,
feel like, I'm 50. I don't think I need, go to a traditional university with a
mhm,
classroom full of 19-year-olds. A community college is a great start because the majority of our students are non traditional. Or
right.
for people who are wanting to make a career change, this may be a good place for them to start to get their feet wet. And they may want to stay here or they may want to transition out eventually.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much for mentioning that. I only got a few more questions. Again, you're saying some really great things. I know our students and our parents are taking some great notes. You mentioned earlier Greek life, right? I know you're part of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. And so a lot of times that's a question we get from a lot of students and parents, right? Hey, I'm going to a 4 year. I am interested in, if it's a traditionally African American Greek organization, or it could be even when we look at some of the predominantly white Greek organizations. Any advice for just say a new freshman, right, that's on the University of Memphis campus or Middle Tennessee State University campus? Any advice that you would give to that student on how to research, how to start the process?
So first and foremost, since we just got finished talking about a community college, I want to clarify that
Yeah.
community colleges do not offer
Mhm.
Greek letter organizations. We get that question all the time, and I
Yeah.
see people's dreams fade away.
Yeah.
So if you come to a community college, you can set yourself up, get your
Yeah.
grades right, get your community service up, so that when you transfer, you can look to join a organization. Those are the biggest things. Black Greek letter organizations are service organizations, so you
Hmm.
cannot have you cannot just sit at home and not do
Right.
anything, and your grades are falling off and you expect to just join. I know
Hmm.
people see them strolling and see the jackets and the glamour and think it's all fun, and it is, but
Right.
there's more under the surface. And so you need to be getting involved in your community. You want to
Hmm.
get your community service hours up. You need to look at the organization of your interest and see what their community service hours are. Some don't allow you to pledge as a freshman, some do. You also need to make sure that your GPA is up. That is the
Right.
most important
Yeah.
thing of all.
Yeah.
You need something to set you apart. You need
Mhm.
something so when they look at your application, they're like, okay, I want to talk to this person and learn more about them.
Yeah.
And you want to get to know the ones on campus. You want to make sure that you have somebody to write your letters and things of that
Hmm.
nature when
Hmm.
it's time. And
Right.
the biggest advice that I have is to, when it comes to research, know what you want to do, because so
Hmm.
many times
Hmm.
people will grow up and they're like, well, my mom was a Delta or my
Right.
aunt is a Zeta, so that's what I'm going to be.
Yeah.
But do know what Zeta or Delta or AKA or Israel, whatever, you know what it's about. So you
Right.
want to read and learn their characteristics, what they stand on, their principles, and make sure that they align with who you are
Yeah.
before
Yeah.
you pursue them.
Got you, got you. And again, I asked that question because, like you said, that's I think coming from high school, that's probably I would say when I was recruiting, that was in my top three
Yeah,
about
that's
Greek
the part.
organization. And it's a good question because again, a lot of folks' families are not Greek, right? And so
Mhm.
again, I want to do this podcast so we can have some real conversations and really get our students ready when they step foot onto their college campus. So thank you for sharing that. As we come to a close, right? The name of the book is called How to Play the Game of College. I'm calling myself dropping some major gems to really help students and really set them up for success to get to and through college, right? What's one piece of the game that you would say, hey, I'm giving y'all this for free? Now, if I was giving it outside of this podcast, I may have to charge for it, right? I've been in post-secondary. How long you been in post-secondary, Dr. Jordan?
13 years.
13 years. Wow.
Mhm,
Long time. And
mhm.
so just looking at students over 13 years, thinking about yourself, what's that one piece of advice that you say, hey, if you do this particular thing, I promise you, you will get through this particular degree.
So mine would be actually something that you mentioned in the book, which if you know me, I'm a huge advocate for, and that's just getting involved.
Mm,
My motto, it's on my board, is don't just go to class, go to college. And
yeah,
so
yeah.
that the students who I find are the ones that struggle are the ones that go to class and they go
Hmm.
home. Theoretically proven that you have to get involved. That gives you your sense of belonging on campus. That gives you your connection. That gives you your accountability partner. So that when it does get tough and
Right.
you do think about quitting or dropping out, you know somebody that's like, Sean, we're gonna try this again.
Hmm. Hmm.
You're gonna work on this class.
Yeah.
But it gives you a sense of just belonging. It helps you to find your niche at your institution to know that you belong there. And then again, the point of going to college, of course, is to find yourself and those things, but it's to get a job. And so
Yeah.
that's where you learn those transferable skills. That's where you learn how to time management. That's where you learn the
Hmm.
communication. You learn conflict resolution. You
Hmm.
really learn how to work with people. So
Yeah.
getting
Yeah.
involved that'll be my biggest advice. I tell students that all the time. My number
Yeah.
one question I ask a student when I find out, like they're in college, I always ask them what's their major and what do you do
Hmm.
on campus. And
Yeah. Yeah.
those two things can tell me a lot. And there's typically so many things for you to get involved in. So you don't have to think if Greek letter pledging is not your thing, that's
Yeah.
fine. Maybe
Right.
student government is, or maybe the Black Student Association or Hispanic Student Association. Maybe you want to be with the religious organization. Maybe you want to be with I don't know, Stonewall Tigers or
Yeah. Yeah.
LGBTQ thing, whatever you may think
Right.
of. There's your tribe. So you just need to
Hmm.
find your
Hmm.
tribe and succeed in that way.
That's a great piece of advice. Like you said, it's more about just going to a club. It's sense of belonging. It's that, accountability, right? Like you said, hey, there's going to be days that's a real feeling, right? Where you like, now, why did I sign up for this? I could be working, at Amazon or another place making $18 an hour. However, I'm here to sometimes delay gratification, right? In order to get a job later, right? So
Right.
again, thank you so much for sharing that advice. Dr. Jordan,
Yes.
it's been 25 minutes and
Because
I
I can
hate to
talk.
end
I'm
this.
sorry.
No, this has been good. And I'm sure, again, folks are taking notes. And one part of the podcast I want to do, I love to give folks their flowers. And so, again, I want to be more intentional about the guests that I did interview. And Dr. Jordan, I call her Amanda,
Hmm.
been knowing her for a long time. And again, met you when I was just starting my career, I guess, in higher ed at the University of Memphis. And have been blessed, when I say blessed, and honored to watch your journey
Oh,
um,
thank you.
throughout this 13 years of higher ed, your family, and just all the great things that you're doing. And guess what? This is just the beginning.
It
Like,
is. I
a lot more to
claim it.
go. We got a lot more to go. So again, I just thank you for your friendship over the years. And again, I'm excited about what's coming next for you. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And this is just
Yeah.
evident of the relationship building we
Yeah,
talked about.
yeah,
So,
so true, so
yes.
true. Yes, well, yes, thank you for tuning in, Dr. Jordan, about the book out. It means I got to do a better job about bringing it out. So make sure you go to Amazon. You can go to my website. This book, along with the podcast, you can write notes from the podcast in the book, go to those particular chapters. Make sure you grab that book. And Dr. Jordan, if it's okay, we will share your information on this podcast, your
Absolutely.
LinkedIn, and maybe your email address. So if folks have questions outside of this podcast, they'll definitely know to contact you.
And I wanted to share
Yeah.
that we are giving two scholarships from my church, and they get this book as well. So
Oh,
this will help
good.
them on their
Very
journey.
good. Make
Mhm.
sure you take some pictures for me.
I will.
Okay.
I
Well,
will.
thank you so much, guys. We will see you all next week for another great interview. Make sure you like, make sure you share, make sure you comment, subscribe to this channel to get some really great information. We'll see you next week. Thank you.